Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I am Kristin and joined by Ron. Ron, I almost went right into I'm joined by Ron Ward without talking about who I am. But Ron is my co-host and hero. Let's not forget that. Ron, what's new with you?
As you know, I'm going out of town, going to Ohio and then Texas. I have speaking engagements over the next 2 weeks and very excited about it. I can't even tell you, Kristin, it's so fun to meet people, but you get to share information you've studied and prepared for. So It's a cool gig. It really is.
Yeah. I'm wearing my Texas shirt. All right.
There you go.
I got it at Magnolia. That was a cool place. But that's fantastic, Ron. And, I just got back from the beach. I don't have too much going on right now. I literally just got in yesterday. The Oregon coast was beautiful.
Wow.
Very hot and sunny, which is rare. So little tidbit before we dive into today's episode. If it's 90 degrees in Portland, you have to subtract 30 degrees, and that's what it'll be on the Oregon coast.
Ooh,
so it was
I didn't know
literally, it's in the 60s when it's in the 90s here in Portland. So it was a nice reprieve. But today we are going to be discussing the topic of leadership lessons from Biden's cognitive decline. Now, we know this news broke almost a month ago at this point, but we felt it really important to dive into it, pull it apart, and try to understand the leadership decisions that were made throughout the last 4 years.
Yeah. And Kristin and I have been open and upfront that we are conservative politically, but what we want to do, and those of you that are led by your emotions, this episode is not going to be good for you, so it might trigger you. So go ahead and, do what you got to do. But if you are objective and you like leadership lessons and leadership tips, this is a great example, and it goes to the highest office in our government. And we're going to try to take an objective look at this. We're going to take a look at the cover-up, first the decline, then the cover-up, and then the lessons that we can take away from it.
Yeah. No, I think that's great that you called that out. Really, when you think about leadership lessons, one of the first ones we're going to be talking about is transparency. And leaders should be as transparent as possible, and their advisors should do the same. And that's what I appreciate about the Trump administration right now. I would say it's the most transparent administration in U.S. history.
Yeah, like it or not. I mean, he's doing, has the press in the Oval. I've never seen anything like it. The press in the Oval Office, plus you've got the press secretary. It's pretty unbelievable. Kristin, I did want to note that we always prepare for episodes, but this one I prepared more because I've read 2 of the books we're going to talk about.
Yes.
In preparation for this episode. So I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp, and I know you do as well with all the news and everything, but I think it is going to enhance. So stay with us, folks.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of respect for you for taking the time and going and reading what we could consider the opposition's books. And I think if more people did that and tried to get in the minds of those who disagree with them, you would be enriched. So books and media reports have acknowledged President Biden's decline. Now, there are excerpts from the new book by CNN's Jake Tapper, and that's one of the ones you read, Ron.
Yep.
And Alex Thompson, titled Original Sin, and it's subtitled President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. And that book, along with others, reveals steps that those around Biden took to shield the signs of his cognitive decline as his presidency and reelection bid carried on.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about the decline and what his staff did to cover up for him. It's been learned, and this comes from those books and other sources, that members of the White House staff scripted cabinet meetings and used multiple cameras to cover flubs that he had.
Yeah. I think, we would see that being called out on social media. They would show different little bits of that. But it's nice to hear that confirmed. We knew it was happening.
Yeah.
And on top of all of the books and articles on this matter, this week, a Secret Service whistleblower, might be even last week at this point, advised that Biden's decline was worse than reported. And the whistleblower recalled more than one instance where Biden got lost in his closet. His closet.
Yeah, and you
Like
did
a
hear
bedroom
that.
closet.
Yeah, you heard that right, folks.
Yikes.
Further, Tapper and Thompson also reported Biden increasingly relied on teleprompters and note cards, even for private discussions like cabinet meetings. And by the way, Kristin, you talked about transparency. I don't know if you knew this, but one source reported that Biden had like 4 cabinet meetings in a year, and your cabinet, that's your primary advisors. And
Wow.
the leadership, we talk about transparency, but what about communication? And as I tell you what, folks, would be fun just to write down leadership points that you can take from this and do the opposite, and you're going to do well.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, if you think about that, so a quarterly cabinet meeting, like that cadence does not scream success for me. House Speaker Mike Johnson reported, now I remember seeing this about when it came out initially, but he reported that he asked Biden why he had suspended natural gas exports to Europe. You guys probably saw that clip on social. And Johnson said that Biden wasn't even aware that the program had been suspended by executive order. And, I would say this is where the concern over the auto pen would come in.
And Kristin, let me tell you why I believe Speaker Johnson, even if I were on either side, when this initially happened, he didn't report it because he said, I knew that people were just going to say, this is politics, I'm trying to degrade the president and all that. So he held off on it. And then when he did report it, but he said he legitimately believes that Biden had no idea that this natural gas export had been suspended, because Biden literally looked at a staffer and said, did I do that? And he goes, it's for testing. And then he looks back at Johnson and said, it's for testing. So he was just like a parrot. He was repeating what a staffer told him. Oh, that's so dangerous and scary to me.
It really is. It really is. If we look back 2 weeks after Joe Biden's terrible debate performance, I think the nation saw that. Though it was on the world stage, actually, with President Trump, and he did not recognize George Clooney, one of the most popular people on the planet. So those two instances combined, and then weeks later, Clooney finally wrote about Biden's cognitive decline in an article in the New York Post. Kind of sad that it took a celebrity to get people paying attention.
Well, it did. And he was hailed as a hero, but when George Clooney did it, it was after immense pressure from both political officials and other Hollywood types. And but he didn't do that until after the debate. He knew this before the debate, but when Biden was obviously in a state of decline, he did this. And then Alex Thompson won an award for the reporting. You mentioned him earlier. He wrote the book with Jay Tapper, Original Sin. He's with Axios, and he won this reporting award. And he literally said, I do kind of like him, but let's be honest, he stands up and says,
likable.
He stands up and says, we all missed this story. And it was very evident that people on the conservative side did not miss the story. So that tells you how biased, when they're given media awards and Pulitzer Prizes, how that works, because this story was being reported on in conservative media over the past 3 years, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I can count on more than 2 hands how many times I was flagged as, when I would post stuff like that, it was flagged as misinformation, right? So, and here it is, real accounts of it happening. Leadership lesson, I would say 2 here would be integrity, and leadership should tell the truth regardless of the situation. And as we go back and analyze Biden's leadership, it's essential that we consider how his cognitive decline is portrayed in the media. Think about it. Reflect on that. Critics have labeled those who questioned his capabilities as ageist, framing Biden's struggles as mere bad nights rather than the significant issue that it was.
Yeah, and when you gaslight, people for bringing up the truth, then you make people, it creates confusion. It happens in
Yeah.
relationships, it happens at work, but that is almost the epitome of gaslighting. Like, no, don't worry, there's nothing to see here. You are being
Right.
ageist. You are against this person. And Kristin, I'll jump in
Right.
here, since the second book that I read was called Fight by Jonathan Allen and Amie Parnes. And then there's another book, Uncharted by Chris Whipple. These books all tell a similar story, in that staffers believed they could prop Biden up enough for him to run for president, and then they could just go back to business as usual. During COVID, if you remember, they joke about him staying in his basement, but he was definitely in his house. He didn't have to debate. He didn't have to make strategic interactions where the public could see. So it was the perfect storm for him to be able to be president, but I'm not sure that he was that sharp even when he was locked in during COVID. So all of these things happen, and we begin to really get to see how partisan politics plays out. There were people literally saying, I don't care if he's in a coma or if he dies, I still, or I would vote for whatever, an animal over Trump, those kind of things. And then, Kristin, we're finding out, and this is going to be a new topic of debate, is that he had prostate cancer and supposedly had not been tested in 14 years. Tell me the truth, Kristin. When you were younger, or even maybe a few years ago, and you think about a White House doctor and you hear that the president's going for a physical, what runs through your mind?
I mean, yeah, the obvious, and even just having a father who gets that tested regularly and a father-in-law who gets that tested regularly, right? And I know my husband's coming of the age. Like, that's just common sense that you would get those levels tested, right?
Not
annually,
only,
at least.
Yeah.
And if it's the White House, probably quarterly.
Yeah, not only that, I had this, there's never been I'm talking about in recent, I'm not going way back, but presidents don't just drop dead in the White House. So you think they would have the most advanced, sophisticated care. And if there's testing, they're gonna have it. So that part was just stunning to me, if it's true. Now they're claiming there might be another cover up from a doctor. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
I'm sure there has to have been. I mean, come on. Trump always talked about, even when, they get COVID or the common cold or the flu, like, the care they get is bar none.
Yeah.
So that's just, I can't buy that one.
All right. I'm going to move into our leadership lesson number 3, and that's justification, or in some instances, we've already said gaslighting. Leaders do not justify dishonesty or blame others for pointing it out. And I was watching a new show, and they were trying to throw out excuse after excuse for basically that it was worth saving democracy. Now, I want you to think this through, people, without your emotions. It was worth saving democracy covering up Biden's decline. Trump is so bad that we will lie, cheat, steal, whatever we have to do to keep him out of office. And that concerns me as much as anything, Kristin, because we are losing any respect for the Constitution of the United States, which is really the glue. If that document's gone, we're gonna just go into chaos. So whether I like someone or not, we have to honor the Constitution, and we're at that period in history.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And, we've talked about gaslighting a few times, and I want to dive into that a little bit deeper. Basically, gaslighting is the end justifies the means, right? So when conservative and independent media played videos of Biden's gaffes and his lost train of thought on numerous occasions, his staff and members of the media said the videos were edited. They called them deep fakes and accused the detractors of ageism again, right? Ageism. So when cover-ups began to justify dishonesty, where does it end?
Yeah, that's the thing. And of course, we've got an easy excuse now with AI. They're going to be, I think you're going to see a lot more, by the way, in the future.
Yeah.
But again, gaslighting is, you're the problem. We're not the problem. You're the problem.
Yeah.
And you're conservative media and you're lying and all that. So that's just, there was a time, Kristin, I've said this before, when you got caught on tape, you're busted. Like, that's it. Okay,
Right,
you got me.
right.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
They're going to be
I
either
know.
saying cheap fakes, AI, it was altered. They're going to be using all of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
all right, what else we got?
It makes me think about, I don't know if you heard the recent interview with Joe Rogan and Kash Patel, but they were talking about how, initially there weren't, with Epstein, there weren't videos apparently, right? Like the video wasn't working of him when he allegedly committed suicide, right? But now Kash is saying there are videos, and there are people that are saying, well, maybe it's just AI generated just to get people to be quiet and move on, right? So that's a very real layer of what we're dealing with in today's day and age.
Yeah, and I'm going to make
the technology we have.
I'm going to make you a prediction because I've been in prison a lot, Kristin. And no, I did a lot of interviews. I've been in various types. I've been in federal, state, regional jails, local jails. Like I've spent a lot of time locked up. But what you're going to see from that is you're going to see a camera that's in a hallway. So it's going to be down a hallway. It's going to be not real clear. But what Kash Patel was saying, and look, people don't understand this. Conspiracies are so much fun. Joe Rogan said that. They are so much fun.
Yeah.
But when you are in law enforcement and something either has to go in a court of law or you got to prove something, they're not seeing any entry or exit from that hallway. And
Right.
So that's what they're going on. I trust Dan Bongino and Kash Patel to, as much as they can, tell the truth. And they're going to release that video. Is it altered? I would think the FBI has enough resources and savvy to determine if a video has been modified in some way. So I don't want to get too far on that, but I do think that AI, and you're going to be seeing more and more videos. My God, look what they're already doing, turning people into babies, which they're fun to watch.
I know, I've seen that.
You've arrived when they make a baby out of you, Kristin.
I know. I haven't brought myself to repost any of those, but it is humorous. Okay. I want people to consider something. Why would Biden's staffers engage in such a cover up? And I think because we think, a lot of people out there have common sense. We're finding it's not so common anymore. But when you think about an entire operation, I mean, hundreds of people involved in a cover up, I want to break it down. I would say, number one, job protection. That one's pretty obvious. Yeah. They don't want to lose their jobs. And then even in articles and some of the books that you've read, Ron, and other books that were written, it was noted that the inner circle would protect Joe Biden from negative poll numbers. And that's not even, what was on the public stage. These are it's polling. They didn't want to be removed from this inner circle. So they just wouldn't relay the negative news or the bad news.
And Kristin, let's have a slight empathetic moment. Can you imagine the power you must have to be in the inner circle at the White House? This is not a regular job. This is the most powerful man in the world, and you are in his inner circle. I'm not justifying it, but it would sure be hard to give up. Now, the lengths that they went to is bewildering. But anyone that loses, I remember when, I don't know if you remember this, when George H.W. Bush was, when Bill Clinton was moving out, George H.W. Bush, I believe, was coming in. Anyway, they removed W's from all the keyboards. And so people,
did they really?
Yeah, the staffers did. So they had to get those replaced, which is just a childish waste of money.
Right.
So anyway, it was. Wow. It was George W. coming in because he had beaten Al Gore in that close. That's the hanging Chad thing from Florida. So anyway,
yes, bringing back all these memories.
I know. I love this stuff. You complimented me for reading 2 books, and folks, I would like to say the only reason I read those was to get ready for this podcast. But God, I love those kind of books. So there was some pleasure reading there as well.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. I know I was at Barnes and Noble recently and the entire wall was like, well, this one section was like all political. I'm like, this is my jam right here.
you can tell that
Oh,
politics is getting important by the number of voters. The number keeps going up because there
yes.
was a time people were just like, who gives a crap? And they didn't really
I
vote. So,
know. It's so different.
all right, let's look at the second reason that you would actually lie and try to cover up for Biden, and that's to promote the long term success of the party. Think
Yeah.
about this, Kristen. These people wear the donkey, they wear the blue hat, and they hate Republicans. They love Democrats. Vice versa, by the
Mm-hmm.
way. There's each side has these loyal party members, and they're looking out to make sure that we maintain power. We, meaning the whole party, we
Sure.
maintain power for years to come. So they justified it by saying that they hated Trump, of course, and they're protecting
Mm-hmm.
their own job, but also they're looking out for the good of the party.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, that is true. And it does happen. It's called towing the line on both sides. I was talking to my husband recently. I'm like, what do you think Gavin is going to do? Because our son, man, I feel like he could be the next JD Vance. And he goes, his moral compass is too strong to toe the line. And I was like, you are so right. Gavin would never toe the line if he didn't agree with it morally. And so that's something to think about. Like these folks, that is the ultimate towing the line. Failure to consider a gap analysis. We talk about gap analysis often. Instead of considering the dissatisfaction of the American voters, Biden and his staffers ignored the concerns that were revealed in national polls. And that's that where, he wasn't being, to his credit, he wasn't being presented with the numbers. It sounds like they were protecting him from that potential negative.
They
And, go
Yeah,
ahead.
they would
Oh, yeah, you
find
read the
one
books.
poll that might show 3 counties or something, and they would show
Yeah.
him that. But the ones that were saying
Okay.
he was behind by 5, 6 points, and
Yeah.
especially in those blue wall states, swing states, they would try to spin that a little bit. And there was a little bit of shoot the messenger, I think, as well. Joe
Mm-hmm.
Biden, people would bring him bad news. They would lose their access to the inner circle. So that happens. That happens in the
Yeah.
mafia, the mob. That happens in corporations every day. You don't bring the truth to the boss.
Ron, bring it full circle here because I want to think about, when I hired teams as the leader, I didn't want yes men and yes women on my team. I wanted folks that thought differently and that would bring a diversity of thought because that's how we were able to be whole. And I'm sure you did the same as a leader of your departments.
Yeah, and of course, I wasn't involved in hiring everyone when I got on board, but you got to provide that psychological safety and start paving the way for them to speak up. There's a term called contrarian, and that is someone that thinks contrary to the norm, and they can be very creative. The problem happens, and this is some things that I've coached on. I've had people who are dissatisfied with the job, they feel demoralized, but they lash out and they think
Yeah.
their boss doesn't accept feedback, but actually it's the process and how they do it. So it leads
Yeah.
us into trust. So, Kristen, if we could kind of combine these two
Mm-hmm.
conversations, but yes, I wanted alternate opinions, but I also had to have trust for someone. And out of a survey
Yeah.
of 1,000 people, they gave employees gave one word that they wanted from their boss, and that was trust. So when trust is
Mm.
broken, it's almost impossible to recover.
Yeah.
And this situation has cost so much distrust to the federal government. Congress was already at record lows, and it's also created a mistrust for the mainstream media. When you are seeing, we live in an age of video, we live in an age
Oh,
of
yeah.
podcasts and all this stuff, social media. You're literally watching this decline before your very eyes.
Right.
And then you go watch CNN, for example, or MSNBC, and they're talking about Joe Scarborough said, "Look me in the eye that it's the sharpest Biden he's ever seen." Those statements are not aging well, and we need to be
Right.
cognizant. Even Kristen and I, when we do a podcast, there's some things we put the brakes on because we weren't sure about it. And
Right.
because if over and over we brought you guys that are listening, if we keep bringing you our opinions and then they prove out to be wrong, you're not going to have much
Mm-hmm.
trust or respect for us.
Right.
So I think the trust was broken with the American people, and the cover up aided that. But the post cover up is even worse. When all these books are coming out and you're still trying to go on The View, Jill takes President Biden on The View and literally has to speak for him to prove that he's
Yeah.
cognitively secure or healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't a good look, Kristin. That's for sure.
No. There's no coming back from that. And when trust is broken, like you said, it is almost impossible to recover. I go to great extents. Like I've been posting news and media reels for 4.5 years, and I've gotten much tighter with fact checking myself. So I'm going through and I'm making sure that everything I'm posting, I'm not just throwing things up for clickbait. I like to give a backstory, and I am getting tighter and tighter with that. And it's really important because that is why people trust me. If I just threw clickbait out there, then they wouldn't trust me. And for those that are not in the social world, clickbait, just something that literally it lacks substance. It's something that you're watching and you're like, what is going on? Yes, it's interesting. They want you to click on it, but they don't really give you where it happened, when it happened, what is happening, like zero context. So that breaks down trust, even in my social media world. So it is incredibly important all around.
Yeah, and the clickbait works. Don't get me wrong, it obviously does.
Mm-hmm.
But they will put such extreme titles that you click on that it says, so and so has resigned. And then they go right in without explaining, just go, yeah, this could even lead to his resigning, and you're like, wait, your
Yeah.
title said he resigned. So,
Yeah.
folks, I will tell you this. I have been focused on and doing coaching. It's made me do this, but priorities. And I realized, even though I coach people not to go down rabbit holes when you're conversing, I realized that I was still vulnerable to clickbait. But if you wise up, you can see they're just wanting you. And when they say watch to the end, it's to help them beat the algorithms. So
Yes,
they're going to build
exactly.
something up that may never happen at the end. And you've wasted all of this time. So it's
Yeah.
so liberating. You and I have never talked about this, Kristin. This only happened to me
Yeah.
maybe, a few months ago. But I just don't take the bait. Since you used the word clickbait, I
Right.
stopped taking the
Yeah.
bait. It's helped. It's unhealthy. And a lot of times I would be frustrated. And even if it is interesting, can I live without it? Yes, I can. So
Right.
this
Right.
is something that I'm coaching people with as well, is these distractions and time wasters. And it's amazing
Yes.
just how many that there are. And when they're telling you to watch to the end, that's the moment you should click off, because there's
Right.
probably
Right.
nothing going to happen at the end. This is an algorithm situation and they're using you as a pawn.
Yeah. Yeah. No, congratulations, Ron. You've been enlightened.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, my husband used to share with me like reels once in a while, and he'd be like, "Can you believe that?" I'm like, "That is fake. It's staged." Like, like the fake arguments on the airplane. Like, literally, people are doing this on air. Like, you've probably seen those where it's like a lady and she's freaking out on a guy with the Trump hat on an airplane. It's staged, and even people in my world that are, that post political memes and videos, they fell for it too. I'm like, you guys, come on. So yeah, look for it. There's a lot of fakes out there. They just want you to click on it.
And Kristin and I have said this before, but I Googled one time. This was when J.D. Vance was going to debate Tim Walz. And it turns out Tim Walz had lied about something in his military service. He claimed he had been in a war zone when he hadn't. So I looked that up. And folks, please hear me out. I'm talking about objective truth here, but you cannot even trust Google, because the first 8 to 10 articles says J.D. Vance disrespects. No, this was post-debate. J.D. Vance disrespects Tim Walz's military service. Shame on J.D. Vance for bringing out, one military person disrespect. Like, I had to go all the way down to get to the point of, wait a minute, Tim Walz lied, and J.D. Vance called him on it. So even when you are doing your online research, you got to be careful. You better go. I tell everyone I skip the first 5 are ads anyway. So they're leaning, and sometimes the first 10, I always go down below that when I'm trying to get factual information.
Yeah. And I have to I'll do you one better here. I don't use Google at all anymore. I use ChatGPT. There's Chatster or all sorts of different AI out there, but I use ChatGPT and I ask it the questions. It will go find me the answers. Now, generally, I have a baseline understanding. So if anything ever returns and it's incorrect, I challenge it. You do have to challenge AI once in a while. Like they'll say something didn't happen and I'll say this happened within the last 24 hours. You need to dig deeper. And, oh, I'm sorry, here it is, right? So you can do that. Google is a for-profit business. So they are paid for certain articles and websites to be returned at the top. With ChatGPT, it's a bit different. You still have to be aware. You have to be discerning. But that has helped me so much be able to find my quasi-unbiased answers.
Yeah, and my primary search engine is DuckDuckGo. But I do use Google. I can't deny that because I'm about to buy some Google ads for the company because, 90% of the people use Google. So there you go.
Yeah. Hey, do what you got to do. But it's good when people are doing research to understand. Those folks are paying for their website to return in the top 10.
Everyone, thanks so much. Kristin, how can people help us out? We got to get to that 25,000 downloads.
Yeah, we need you to, we need some ratings, some fresh ratings on our podcast. So please, it takes 5 seconds. Go in and rate the podcast, share it with a friend, share it with family, right? Like just whatever you can, share us out, follow us on social. It's very helpful. If you are watching, that's amazing. Please also go give us a view or a download on the actual audio podcast as well. That helps our numbers. We are so close.
Yeah, we are getting there. All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for sticking with us. And we hope we've given you an objective approach to leadership using this whole President Biden situation as a guidepost. And hopefully you glean some good stuff out of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.